I have this EMR-TEK Firewave red light therapy panel here, and I'm wondering if it flickers. So if you don't know what flicker is when a light's output intensity changes with time. Flicker can be introduced into lighting intentionally or unintentionally. Sometimes it's done to adjust the brightness of LEDs or to save power. Other times, flicker happens unintentionally due to the power source of the light. Flicker is something you generally don't want in a light you're going to be exposed to because it can cause headaches, eye strain, even migraines can be brought on by flicker. So definitely in a red light therapy panel, you don't want to be exposing yourself to high intensity red flickering lights. So the EMR-TEK website says that this light is low flicker, but they don't provide any testing that I could find, and they referenced a blog post about it, but I also couldn't find that. So I have something here I made for another purpose, which is basically a flicker measurement device. This is the detector, and this will measure the light waveform, and I can read that out on my computer. So looking over here, what you're looking at here is actually not the flicker from the EMR-TEK, this is from the lights in my room, and you can see that it's pretty bad. The flicker index is 24%, which means that it's changing by roughly 24% the average value. But what about the EMR-TEK? Let's do a test on this. So we're going to be testing both the chip on board and the LED mode separately. Okay, what we're looking at here is the LED mode on the EMR-TEK Firewave. Now, what we can see is, firstly, we do see some sort of AC signal here. If this were not flickering at all, this would be a flat line. But we do see some sort of modulation here. Now, if we look at the frequency spectrum, we can see we have one component down here at the power line frequency, so there is a little bit of power line bleed through. And then we also have this higher frequency component that's actually the dominant here at 46.8 kilohertz. And that must be some sort of internal switching of the LEDs, maybe a boost or a buck converter. But anyways, the practical part of this is the flicker percentage is 2.2%, which is actually extremely low. This is less than you'd get from an incandescent light. And since most of the flicker is actually up at 46.8 kilohertz, that's typically not going to be as problematic as those power line flicker frequencies. So the LEDs look pretty good. Now let's take a look at the chip on board. Okay, now we're looking at the results for the chip on board. We can see that the flicker percentage up here is 1.4%, and the chip on board actually has more power line flicker compared to the LED mode, but it's not very much different. The spectrum also looks a little bit dirtier. There might be some high frequency components aliasing down here, but anyways, the important part is that the flicker percentage is very small, and there's not a ton of flicker at that power line frequency. So for my test, EMR-TEK's claims that this is a very low flicker device are definitely true. There's some flicker, but it's at a very high frequency, which is typically not problematic, and it's very small. Maybe some of their other devices, like the battery-powered devices, would have even less flicker, so maybe that's something I'll test in the future, or I could test other manufacturers' panels and see if these are actually superior.